Chapter 1, Lesson 6, Video D. We're going to look at identifying angle pairs. And this is very important about identifying pairs of angle, because it's when we have two things that we're able to compare is what then really gives us the relationship in geometry that we're looking for, that allows us to write those algebraic expressions, which then allow us to determine the solutions for the things that we're looking at. So we're always looking for relationships within these diagrams, because those are what produce the mathematical expression. So right here we're going to look at some pairs of angles that are some relationships between different types of angles, which are going to allow us to, again, to write those mathematical expressions. So the first one we want to look at are vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles whose sides are opposite rays. So if you took the sides of one vertical angle and the sides of the other, they're going to be opposite rays. So breaking that definition down into some of its key points and some information that's not there. First of all, vertical angles have to have the same vertex. Okay, they're not vertical unless they have the same vertex. That wasn't mentioned here, but it's very important. The second thing that is mentioned here is that the sides of these angles are opposite rays to each other. Okay, so the sides have to be opposite rays. And you remember from our definition earlier in the year that opposite rays have the same vertex, which is why these must have the same vertex. And then those opposite rays, they go in opposite directions and they make a straight line. So our opposite rays here should make straight lines as we're looking at vertical angles. Now something that's not here, but something that's very important, that whenever you have intersecting lines, you always have two pairs of vertical angles. So if we look here, angle in this first diagram, angle 1 here, which is this area right in here, and angle 3, these two angles are considered the vertical angles. They're kind of across from each other. And let's see if it kind of matches our definition. Angle 1, if I were to draw over its rays here, or the sides would be here and here, and angle 3 would be the sides of angle 3 would be this one and this one. So do they have the same vertex? Yes, right here, same vertex. Are the sides of this and angle 1 and 3 opposite rays? Yes, this ray and this ray are opposite. This ray and this ray are opposite. And again, we have these intersecting lines, so we always get two pairs of vertical angles. So 1 and 3 here would be considered vertical. What else would be considered vertical here? Okay, so 4 and 2 would also be considered vertical angles. All right, so two pairs of vertical angles anytime you get intersecting lines. So here again you have two intersecting lines, so 1 and 2 would be vertical, 3 and 4 would be considered vertical as well. Over here you have two intersecting lines, so angle A and angle B would be considered vertical, and then these two angles that are not labeled would be considered vertical angles as well. So vertical angles are very important, and again there's going to be a theorem later that describes the measurement or the actual relationship between those two, which again are going to allow us to write some mathematical expressions to help us solve things as we go on. Okay, so that's vertical angles. Next one would be adjacent angles. Adjacent angles, the word adjacent, what does that mean? We'll look at that in a moment. So first of all, let's read the definition. They're coplanar angles. They have a common side and a common vertex and no common interior points. So if we break that down, adjacent simply means next to. So the word adjacent means next to. And you can use that a lot of times, like the student sitting next to you right now. Well, you're listening to this at home, you're probably not sitting next to a student, but if your parent is watching this with you, they are adjacent to you or next to you. The adjacent property would be your neighbor. You know, the person that lives next door is your adjacent, or the adjacent house. So adjacent simply means next to. So for adjacent angles, they're next to each other. They have to be in the same plane. They have a common vertex, a common side, and no points interior are in common. So if we're looking at this diagram right here, if we're looking at angle 1 right here, and then angle 2 goes from here to here, we'll notice that they have a common vertex right here. They have a common side. This side is part of angle 1, and this side is also part of angle 2. And then no common points inside. So in other words, if I was to shade in angle 2, which would be all this over here, And if I was to shade in angle 1, which would be all in here, you wouldn't have anything overlapping. There aren't any points that would be shaded into both. So that's very important when we're talking about adjacent angles. So it's not simply, or it's not as simple as just being next to each other. They can't have any common interior points. Okay, so those would be adjacent angles. And again, those are going to be very important when we look at our next lesson when we're talking about angle addition. Okay. Next pair of angles are what we call complementary. So complementary, again, we want to read this and pick out the points. Two angles whose measure have a sum of 90s. Now, sum is an important word. What does sum mean in mathematics? That means add, right? So we're talking about two angles, and this is important as well. Two angles whose measure or whose sum is 90 degrees. And then each angle is called the complement of the other. So breaking that definition down, we have complementary angles. The sum is equal to 90. Notice what I have here. I have an algebraic expression that the sum, adding two things together, equals 90. This definition is going to allow me to write an algebraic expression which would then allow me to solve and determine the value of a variable. Okay, so this is very important. The sum, meaning you're going to be adding two things together, equals 90. Now it's very important that complementary angles are only two angles. You may have three angles that add up to 90, but they're not complementary to each other. Complementary angles are only two angles, exactly two, no more than two. So any two angles that add up to 90. They are called complements of each other. Now one thing, important thing I want you to notice is right here in diagrams, what does this symbol right here mean? That means 90 degrees, right? So we know that this is 90 degrees. This angle right here is 90 degrees. Okay, so from here to here is, well, let me get this, here to here is 90 degrees. So angle here to here and then here to here add up together, what do they equal? Well, they equal this angle here, so these would be complements of each other. And again, we'll do more of those in class or as we move through the book, but very important that you understand that. Okay, and the last pair of angles that we want to look at are called supplementary angles. Supplementary angles, two angles again. Measures have a sum of 180. So there's that word sum again. So again, that's going to allow us to write a mathematical expression, which again is what geometry is all about. Supplementary angles then again have a sum that equals 180. Again, what do I have here? I have an algebraic expression. I have an equation. So I'm adding two things together that equal 180. And again, there has to be only two. All right. They're called supplements to each other, and something that's kind of cool about this, and again, it's going to be used very often, is you'll notice that supplementary angles add up to 180. In the last video, we had an angle that added up to 180. Do you remember what it was? Yeah, a straight angle, and that any line is a straight angle. So you'll notice up here in this example on the left, if you took this angle from here to here, and this angle from here to here, and put them together, what do they make? They make this straight line, so any straight line is equal to 180. So angle 40 and angle 140 add up to 180, therefore they're supplements of each other. Okay, so those are the definitions, those are the pairs of angles. There's 4 pairs of angles, very important to know, so make sure you study those, and you can go ahead and check out your homework, and if you have questions, bring them on into class.